Changes. By the mid 20th century, Quebec had changed in many ways. The population pushed into farmlands, and rural people living on the farms grew poor. Many had to leave their farms and then move to the big cities. Their lives were very different now. They stopped going to Catholic church. They were no longer leading that traditional lifestyle, and English was spoken in most cities, while French was not. And there you see Quebec City in 1960. Not fair. Many French Canadians felt that their language and culture might eventually disappear. The French culture was overwhelmed by English. They were tired of feeling like second class citizens in their own country. Independence. By the 1960s, Francophones were ready to launch an independence movement. Many French Canadians became Quebec nationalists and thought of themselves as Quebecois, not Canadians. They wanted to secede meaning break apart. If you think of the Civil War when the South wanted to secede from the North, it's where you might have heard of that word before. Many Francophones started to think that Quebec should secede from Canada. Separatists wanted Quebec to separate from Canada's central government, become its own independent nation. They want to preserve their culture, religion, and ethnic identity and not be absorbed in Canadian society. So you would have had Canada and their 12 provinces, and then Quebec as its own separate country. And there you see some people protesting. These two people seem very excited. This child looks confused. That is the Quebec flag. Yay, Quebec! Yeah, yeah. I'm confused. Why should they separate? Well, those that wanted to support it and wanted it to be separate said they would protect their language and culture. They would then be treated as equals with the English speaking Canadians. They thought other Canadians would respect the French language and culture more, and they wanted to preserve French Canadian culture for future generations. Those that were against it, and there were many that did oppose it, thought it would ruin national unity and pride. It could result in an economic disaster for Quebec. It would also make the rest of Canada lose a lot of the natural resources Quebec had and some of the high tech industry Quebec had, and Quebec controlled the St. Lawrence River. That would also cause a problem for Canada. A vote. Most English Canadians felt most French Canadians had always had equal rights and enough representation in the government. So the national government argued against secession, but they did have a vote. In 1980 and in 1995, the people of Quebec voted whether to break apart and secede or stay as one. Both votes favored staying as one Canadian country. But the last vote in 1995 was extremely close. You can see 49.4 wanted to become independent in their own, only 50.6% voted to stay in Canada. It was a vote that came right down to the end. But as I said, in both referendums or votes, Quebec citizens voted to remain part of Canada and keep as one country. Today, in 1982, the Constitution Act made Canada bilingual, so you may speak French or English if you live there. In 1988, Canada's government passed laws giving all Canadians the right to preserve their culture and their heritage. And then in 1988, Canada's Supreme Court ruled that Quebec could not secede without the consent from all other 12 provinces. Today, the separatist movements become weaker and weaker and more divided and will make the goal most likely even harder to achieve.